Hello and welcome to Careers Unlocked, a podcast brought to you by the EY Foundation. The EY Foundation supports young people on free school meals to access paid work experience, employability skills and career guidance, and ultimately to further their opportunities in the world of work. We do this through programmes and partnerships that meaningfully join up both sides of the labour market. I'm Kathryn Eastwood, Director of Income and Employer Partnerships at the EY Foundation, and it's a pleasure to welcome you back to Series 4 of the podcast. If you're just joining us, you've got 10 episodes to go and listen to, and if you're a regular listener, welcome back. All right, so today we are mixing up the format slightly and we're going to bring you a different kind of episode by shining a spotlight on the career of our guest. So we're going to be speaking to somebody with an incredibly interesting story. And this conversation is a chance for us to delve into his career journey and uncover the trials, tribulations, and lessons learned along the way. So let me introduce our guest. Roger Wade is the founder and former CEO of BOXPARK. After graduating from university, Roger started Boxfresh, the original British streetwear brand, in 1989. He grew the Boxfresh brand from a market stall to a hugely successful international brand, selling in 12 different countries. In 2005, Roger sold Boxfresh and formed his own brand consultancy. Then, in 2010, he founded and created the world's first pop-up mall, BOXPARK Shoreditch. In 2015, BOXPARK launched in Croydon and later in Wembley in 2018. Roger was a regular columnist for Drapers and is a renowned conference speaker. He was an associate lecturer at the London College of Fashion and a member of the Co-Brands Council. Roger is passionate about independent brands, the future of retail, and thinking outside the box. Roger, it's so lovely to have you on the podcast, and I cannot wait to hear some of the lesser known stories behind such an incredible journey. But before we dive into all of that, first things first, how are you today?
I'm very well, and I'm delighted to be chatting to you today, and more importantly, chatting to a younger audience of people starting on their entrepreneurial career.
Well, you said it yourself, Roger. Plenty of our listeners are still in school or college. So if it's okay with you, I want to take it right back and start there. Can we talk a little bit about what your experience of school was? And do you remember knowing exactly what you wanted to do or where you wanted to be when you were leaving school?
Yeah, I'm going to really start right at the very beginning. My mum was from, I would say, actually, to be frank, poor upbringing in Dublin, one of 10 sisters and one brother, living in a two up, two down, what they call a corporation house. She met my dad, who was studying medicine. And basically, they had my sister and they moved to London. And then a couple of years later, I came along. So basically, I was born in London. And at the age of 2, I went to Malaysia. I lived there until the age of 7. And I sort of guess I lived quite a privileged lifestyle in Malaysia. And unfortunately, my parents split up when I was about 7. And my mum brought me back to the UK. And literally, I came back to the UK with the clothes on my back. Actually, it's even funnier than that. My mum didn't even have my passport. At the age of 7, she smuggled me on a BOAC plane and pretended I was a baby. And I even remember to this day the argument in Singapore airport. But ma'am, it's not a baby. And she's going, no, he's just very large, baby. So I went from a privileged upbringing to not having anything. And I went to an all boys rugby playing Irish Catholic grammar school, which was taught by brothers in southeast London, which was a really good school at that time. And I really didn't excel. I really faced a lot of bullying at the time. I think it was a period of about 1976. I remember the National Front. Or if your listeners don't know it, it was sort of the pre-runner to what I guess is the British National Party, a very right-wing, pro-nationalist party, walking through Lewisham. And Lewisham was very much a black-dominated community. And there was riots literally at the bottom of our school. You know, I don't think I really excelled at school and really reached my full potential. And unfortunately, at the age of about 17, I had a near-death experience where I was separating a fight between some friends after a party, and I got assaulted by somebody that I didn't even know. A young kid came up to me, and I thought he punched me, and he actually put a bottle on the side of my face, and I nearly died at a young age. Okay, so I'm trying to build up this sort of picture of I didn't reach my full potential at school, and as a result of that, I failed my exams to go to medical school. Not that I really wanted to do that anyway. Basically, I went through clearing and I just did any degree that I could do. And I literally did a degree in environmental science at Sussex University.
Roger, on that, can I just ask, was it that you were so determined to go to university that you would have gone anywhere to do anything? And was it a feeling at the time that going to university after school was the thing that you should do or that one should do?
Look, I'm a product of an Irish Catholic mum, and basically, that was my mum's dream for me to go to university. I was the first member of our Irish Catholic family to ever go to university.
So at that time, did you let yourself consider any other options, or was it you will go to university?
I didn't have enough sort of sense of who I was, and I was just, I guess, following my Irish Catholic mum's dream. And especially if you come from a difficult background, that if you don't use your intelligence and go to university, it'd be a crime. So I went to university, but I didn't enjoy it. But at university, I started running clubs, nightclubs, because I was really into music. It was like 1985 to 1988, and the whole dance music scene was just exploding. You know, it really was happening in the late 80s. It was a vibrant scene, and I was running clubs, and almost I was following my heart without thinking about it. So I spent most of my time running clubs.
Hmm.
And then after university, I was again, I guess, following my parents' dream. Was like, oh yeah, I'll get a job in advertising. Although I did have an interest in advertising, and I still do. And my first three jobs in advertising, I got a sack after probation. I think the last one said to me I was unemployable.
And upon reflection, were there any common themes that you saw across those three jobs? Was it that your heart wasn't in it, you weren't interested, or were there certain behavior traits that you were displaying or certain attributes?
It was the same behavior traits like, that I had at primary school. I'd be the kid that would always be putting his hand up, and all the rest of the kids would be going, oh, not him again. Will you just shut up? We're trying to get out the lesson. I was just really inquisitive. So when I got a job, and my first job was buying media space, they wanted me to sit at my desk the whole day. And I was like, I want to find out how we make this advertising. I want to find out where the production is. I want to find out how it all operates. So they'd never find me at my desk. And it was a running joke. So I just had to know, I guess the trait was that I had to know how everything works before I could just do one part of it.
Right.
And I didn't realize that was actually a really good trait. You know, they thought it was a really bad trait. So they kept on sacking me. But I thought actually reflection was a really good trait.
Mm.
I guess what I'm saying is at the age of 22, I've been sacked from three jobs on the trot. And my last job, I was working in New York, and I knew where to get all of the American sportswear, where to buy it from the wholesalers in Midtown Manhattan. And I was sending it back to my friends.
Hmm.
And one of my friends ran a market store, and he said, look, I can sell this in the market and we'll split the profit. So I was buying all these baseball hats and all this collegiate stuff and
Hmm.
sending it back, basketball stuff. Remember, it really wasn't widely available back in the late 80s in the UK. And then when I came back from New York after being made redundant, I was like, well, I'll just start selling this on the market. And then from there, literally from being on a market stall in Greenwich and Camden, Portobello, and there was loads of us on there that became quite famous, like Duffers of St. George was there, the Red or Dead guy was next to us,
Wow.
Nigel Hall was there, a lot of really quite famous designer brands.
So hugely influential people in British culture,
Yeah,
let alone fashion and music.
we started on market stalls, and then I bumped into two designers, Olaf and Parker and Sue Denny, and they used to have a background in textile design, and they were just incredibly talented, and they liked all of the sportswear they were bringing over, and they said, look, can you bring blank t-shirts and we can print on them? And then In late 1989, we started what was then Britain's first streetwear brand, which was Boxfresh. Us and
Hmm.
maybe two or three other guys. Duffers of St. George are definitely around. I think there's guys from Mau Mau and Boxfresh. We were the three main guys at that period. And there was no industry. There was no streetwear industry like you see it now. It didn't exist. And we were just selling it in the market store and then selling it to a few accounts. And then we sort of just grew that business over time. And along the way, we brought in brands like Carhartt to the UK. We were the first ever importers of Carhartt. We brought in brands like Penfield. We were the first people to ever bring in G-Star into the UK, Fila into the UK. Loads of brands. Eversue, we're the first guys to bring in Eversue. Tons of brands that we brought in. And that business sort of organically took off. And then over the course of the next 15 years, I built that business up and I eventually sold it to the Pentland Brands, who were a very large branded corporation. They were the owners of Reebok, Berghaus, Kickers, loads of brands, and actually now are the major shareholders in JD Sports.
Roger, just on that point, and there's so much more to your journey that I want to get into, but you've said so many things already that I think we should just pick apart a little bit more.
Yeah.
Firstly, you talked a bit about the same traits that you saw in those first few jobs that you ended up getting sacked from. And, we talked about good traits versus bad traits, but I actually think it's not really about the traits in that sense, but more about the environment. So obviously the school environment did not necessarily get the best out of you. Those desk job environments were not getting the best out of you. So how did you identify your own key skills, and how was it that you learned the best way to apply those? Was that very much by trial and different things, or how did that realization come about for you?
In my case, from adversity. So literally, I came to the conclusion after being sacked from those first three jobs that unless I employ myself, I'm going to be long term unemployable. And just almost then by chance, the only thing that I
Mm,
really liked at that time was sports, football, cricket, clothing, and music. And I went into clothing, and it was at the beginning of the streetwear scene.
mm.
And lo and behold, I was good at it. And I was good at being an entrepreneur.
And I wonder though, when you started this stall and you started to see those entrepreneurial traits, deep down, do you think you knew that you were going to make as much a success of it as you did? Or you just knew that you had that resilience and you to keep going no matter what?
I mean, I've always had resilience and I've always got up no matter what. And I think people would say that about Roger Wade. They would say, look, it would take an elephant gun to knock that guy over. He just keeps getting back up. So resilience is absolutely key. And I would say I'm not the most talented person, but what talent I do have, I totally believe in. But I don't want to overstate this. There wasn't a master plan. There was just,
Mm,
I fell into it and I started to follow my intuition, what
hmm.
I wanted to do, and I became good at it. And I was good at it. I was the kid at secondary school that would run the tuck shop. I was the kid at university that would run the nightclubs. I was the kid that was buying, shares in British Telecom at the age of 16.
Hmm.
I always wanted to achieve something. And I think one of the things about maybe that I've got is I'm not frightened to try things. I think one of the traits that will come out is I never realized how invaluable those early first 5 years of running BoxFresh was to me. And
Mm,
actually, in the later years, I learned all the basics of running business from
hmm.
scratch. Everything that you need to learn about the customer, you'll learn it from the market store.
Hmm.
Everything that you need to learn from product, you'll learn from the market store. Everything that you learn about business, you'll learn from adversity. And then I just built up that knowledge over time. And then I had sort of maybe two or three cycles within Box Fresh where we grew and then grew again and then grew again. The first 5 years, it was very stagnant. We sort of went round in a big circle
Right.
because there wasn't a streetwear industry. And for those young guys out there, I'll tell you a story like Supreme. You probably all know
Hmm.
Supreme, Superdry. I used to sell to the owner of Supreme, James Jebbia, when he had a tiny 100 square foot store. Superdry, Julian Dunkerton. I used to sell Carhartt to Julian when he had one store in Cheltenham called Colt. So, we were just at the beginning of all of this cycle and we grew with it and we also evolved. So there's the first 5 years in London. Then we had about 3 or 4 years out in America with Boxfresh where we grew the brand. And when we were in America and I was living in California, it was really formative because I was living in the town where the owner of Stussy lived, where the owner of Quicksilver lived, where the owner of Billabong lived. And I used to see all of these guys around in Laguna Beach. And so I suddenly realized, God, you can really make money from this.
Mm.
So then my bar sort of raised. And then I got an opportunity to come back and set Box Fresh back up in the UK in 1998. And then we launched another version of Box Fresh, which is Box Fresh Urban Wear. And then we grew, that really exploded for us.
Yeah, with those other people that you were seeing and surrounding yourself with, did you decide to channel that energy into being inspired by what they were doing rather than seeing them as direct competitors? Was it something that you were able to pick up different traits from other people? Did you have any mentors? Did you have inspiration in the circles that you were in?
I think fundamentally, the definition of streetwear was we were inspired by the streets. And the nature of streetwear is that you're inspired by the streets, what you see around you on the streets. So in the early days, like Carhartt became a phenomenon because in places like the Bronx and Harlem and Brooklyn, the young kids were wearing this tough wearing American workwear stuff called Carhartt, and there was bands like Naughty by Nature who were wearing it, and then Stussy did a collab or Tommy Boy did a collab. But so we're taking things to the street, even
Hmm.
the whole sneaker industry, like Pro Keds from back in the day, sort of came from the streets. And actually, people like Nike and Adidas and stuff like that were never involved in streetwear. The kids started to pick their stuff up, and then they started to react to it. But one of the unwritten rules within streetwear was not really to copy anyone else.
Right.
So we were making product, but it was to outdo the next person. It was like a rap battle, but it was a clothing, streetwear battle. And we're going to outdo them in the next style. So what happened to me was as I ran the business for a longer amount of time, I really started to trust my instincts.
Mm.
Rather than relying on designers to tell me what I liked, I started to tell designers what I liked because I was the streetwear kid. And it was when I started to trust my instincts, and then my instincts started to prove correct because they were selling. And
Mm.
this was definitely in the later phases of Box Fresh, where we went from, being a say £1 million turnover business to a £20 million turnover business and one of the most successful independent brands in the UK. It was because I really started to trust myself. So again, it goes back to trusting your instincts. And I'll come back to this message about what we're constantly told now is about data and about analyzing and following. And I'm like, I preach something else. I think Steve Jobs once famously said that unless a focus group can show me a future, they're no good to me. So what he's saying there was Steve Jobs, who I greatly admire, but I admire a lot of other people, they're incredible creatives. They trusted their instinct. They didn't need somebody to show them the future. They created the future.
When you were talking about your instincts, and I think there was something there about being really self-aware, because you said you were the one who wanted to run the music nights, and there were so many traits of that entrepreneurial spirit that were already there in your day to day. So I'm thinking for some of our young people listening, they can tap into their own instincts and also have a look at their day to day or their week to week and the elements of either school or things in their social lives or extracurricular. What is it that they are really good at? What is it that they really love?
Yeah.
And tap into that a bit more and trust themselves a bit more with those elements?
100%. I mean, you're living in a different generation from when I grew up. There wasn't
Mm.
many kids talking about taking on the clothing industry at the time. It was all about designers, and it was the high street. It was not kids that were doing street, but now you have got kids taking over streetwear, and now you have got kids taking over music. I mean, there wasn't stories of like, the Jay-Z's of this world growing up in the projects and the Dr. Dre's and then basically revolutionizing their industries. When I grew up, they were happening just at that time. We were sort of the kids of today. It was almost like a revolution during that period. And the lesson I've got for kids is just follow your instinct. If you love football, be a footballer if you can. If you love numbers, go into numbers, go work in a city, go work for an accountancy practice. But don't let anyone define your boundaries. There are no boundaries. You create your own boundaries.
In terms of the things that have had the biggest impact on your career, and there's so many more aspects of your career we haven't even touched upon yet, but looking back in those earlier days, particularly, what things do you think had the biggest impact in helping determine your success? And by that I mean, did you have a mentor? Was there one person who gave you a chance when you most needed it, or gave you advice that you really relied upon? Or what were the things that had that big impact for you?
I think I've had a few people sort of come along the way that, I would say I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't from them. I think I met a brand consultant called Ted DeCruz when I was quite young, and he was really famous brand consultant. I think he worked as creative director of Wolf Holland's, which at the time was the most famous brand consultancy. And he took me to one side. He saw something in me, and he said to me, "Roger, if you're not special to your customer, you won't exist." Now, it's all right saying that product is king in 2026, but trust me, in 1990, there wasn't many people saying that. That stuck with me, just being special to the customer. I remember Edwin Fay, who now runs Carhartt in Europe and basically took over the Carhartt business that we had in the UK. And I'm still good friends with Edwin. And I'd be like, Edwin, we need to do this. We need to do that. We need to do this. I was like this young kid that wanted to do everything. And he, put his hand around my shoulder and he just sort of said, "Roger, we just need to do the gene."
One step at a time.
Yeah, and that stuck with me. And then there was Nicholas Bauer, who became a very close friend of mine, was the creative director of Stussy, and he gave me my chance in the States. And he didn't need to say, "Look at this young kid, he's talented. There's something about him." It wasn't for him and his advice, I wouldn't be here to this day. And then I guess coming back to the UK, I think I've had people like David Carter Johnson, who was chairman of Foster's, that helped my business, all the people that were with me along the time. And then lately, I guess it's been Sir Charles Dunstan, who backed my next successful business, which was BOXPARK, which was creating a whole retail mall of streetwear and sports inspired fashion.
So maybe turning to BoxPark now, so many people would hear what you've just talked about with regards of what you achieve with Boxfresh and think he's achieved such success. But at that point, what then gave you the drive to just go into a completely new venture? And is that drive something that you think will always be in you? Will there always be a next step?
I don't want people to think I sit there and things happen. What I tend to recognize is most of the things good that's happened to me has come out of adversity. And so I don't look at adversity in the same way that most people look at it. I look at it as an opportunity to overcome something that normal people would not normally look in a positive light. So,
Mm.
from being unemployed and starting Box Fresh to when I started BoxPark, I started it out of adversity because I was a brand consultant to loads of people, to Superdry, to ASOS, working with loads of people. But most of the guys were like me, they had big egos and they never listened to me and it just annoyed me. So I went, forget this. I'm going to do my own business. And it's weird. Steve Jobs once famously said he connected up the dots of his life. And I connected up the dots of my life. So how did I come up with the world's first pop-up mall made for containers? And it was connecting the dots. When I was at Boxfresh, I made a container shop. So I knew about containers. And then when I lived in America, a friend of mine ran a retail development. So I knew, well, if he could run one, I could run one.
Mm-hmm.
And then what people were telling me around the period of the early 2000s up until selling Box Fresh around 2005 was that the internet was going to take over. And I was always believed in that Ted DeCruz mantra, going back to him of if you're not special to your customer, you won't exist. And I really believe that the best retail experience that you could get was in a store. So I went, well, look, I'm going to zig while everyone else is zagging. While everyone else is saying it's all about online, I'm going to believe in the store. So I just said, I'm going to make a whole high street for independents and I'm going to build it out containers. And then I was lucky enough to find a site in Shoreditch. And then I was lucky enough to find an incredible investor in Sir Charles Dunstan, who was, well, probably the most successful retailer entrepreneur in the UK. And with my money from Boxfresh and his backing, we built that business. And over the next 10 years, that business really built up to being a successful business. But again, that business evolved out of adversity. In the first 5 years, like Boxfresh, it didn't do very well. And it was when we morphed the business into street food, not streetwear, when we started going into the entertainment business of events and selling the drink and running fan parks in Wembley and Croydon, that's when we became successful. But with me, I'm always trying to improve. And that inquisitive kid is still in me. I'm never just sitting on my laurels. I'm trying to constantly make it better. And as a result of that, it's not been an overnight success for me. It's been a gradual improvement, but I've focused at what I'm doing. And then I was lucky enough last year to sell that business to Lloyd's Development Capital. And I guess I could have gone off into the sunset and never worked again. I was lucky enough to make a life-changing amount of money. But then something happened to me. I realized that what I wanted to do, what I really enjoyed doing, was I wanted to give something back to young entrepreneurs. And I also wanted to make my children proud. And I decided that what I wanted to do was to set up a entrepreneurial fund, a VC fund, supporting young entrepreneurs create the next breed of consumer brands, but not just any consumer brands that made a better world, ESG consumer brands. Because I believe the youth of today, if you don't have social values, if you're not diverse, if you're not trying to help the planet, you will not survive. So I want to back the new young entrepreneurs that are going to create the consumer brands which are going to make a better world. And that's my aim with Box Fund. There's loads of entrepreneurs out there that are a lot wealthier than me that give away their money. Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, X, Y, and Z. That's great for them. And they're incredible people. And I'm really inspired by them. But I don't have anything like their money. So the most effective way that I can help make this world a bit better and leave a legacy behind is to find the next generation of entrepreneurs who are going to make a better world. And I hope to maybe on my gravestone just have, not Roger Wade, he made loads of money, but Roger Wade, he left this world a bit better than he found it, just a bit. And then my kids might actually look up to me and go, actually, Dad, you're not so bad, really.
I mean, I'm sure they already do, but that does sound incredible. I've got quite a few more questions I want to try and get through. I'm conscious of time, but speaking of the entrepreneurs of today and those young people that you want to inspire and to support through the fund, do you think the world in which we live that is so infiltrated by social media in all its forms, do you think that makes it easier for young people to be an entrepreneur compared to the way that you began?
It's obviously more competitive, but I think there's more knowledge at your fingertip. And in the 35 years that I've been involved in consumer brands, from Boxfresh to BOXPARK, getting involved in the hospitality and events industry, and eventually coming back full circle and now financing, consumer brands, there's three key elements. And the first is product. If you don't have great product, don't bother starting, because content is king. And it's everything about that product has to be perfect nowadays, because if it's not perfect, it just won't exist. And then the next thing is you can have the best product in the world, but unless you create traffic to that product, whether physical or digital, it doesn't matter. You got no one seeing it. There's been some fantastic product up there. There's been loads of designers that gone, but no one's ever seen it. You're not going to be successful. So you've got to create traffic. You've got to create a market. And then finally, once you've got this great product and once you've got people interested in it, then you've got to convert it. Okay. And that's the business of whatever you're in. And that is making profitable sales. But what we've got to do is have equal attention to those three key pillars. So historically, what we've allowed to happen is the business to dictate. Well, in these days, I don't think that's the way you should do things. I think firstly, it's got to be the product and it's got to be the traffic. As a result of that, it's increasingly, if you're creating youth brands, you need to get involved with young people that make great product. You need to get involved with young people that create traffic. And sometimes it can exist the other way. So the Sidemen are great examples of that, where they create a lot of traffic and then they create product to feed to that traffic. Jamal Edwards was an example of that, actually. You know, God bless his soul. He was out there just by himself, 15, 16, with a little camera, shooting videos, uploading them, and, you know, effectively recording the grime scene at the very, very beginning. And then he started getting a big following on his own channel, SBTV, and then that sort of grew. And then the business people started getting involved. It's a great example. So, yeah, to all those out there, if you think you've got a talent, well, step up.
Yeah, and I think what you've identified there, as well as given some really solid advice that I'm sure will be so much appreciated by so many of the young people listening, but it's that chance to be adaptable to the world that is so fast moving in terms of all of the digital capabilities that we have, the way social media is, the way that the power imbalance seems to be more in the hands of young entrepreneurs now in terms of what they can do. But being opportunistic around those things as well, in terms of what you just discussed about using content creation and then driving towards a product.
I'm going to give a good example of that. Ben Francis and Jim Sharp.
Yeah.
Okay. This is my understanding of that story. So Ben Francis, as a young guy, was sort of coming up with a gym range. And then he hooked up with the guy that was one of the founders of All Saints, is my belief. He knew that Ben was good at the product, good at doing the marketing, but he was great at doing the business. And that was a winning combination. So what I would say to those young entrepreneurs, if you've got a great idea or you're really great at getting traffic and you want to create a great product, try and hook up with a accelerator that has the business knowledge and the business background to build your idea around.
Know your own strengths, but be self-aware,
Yeah.
where you need to either learn more or collaborate with somebody who has those skills.
I hear the young kids out there, because I was you, going, yeah, we're going to do it all ourselves and we're going to take all over the world. Well, guys, listen, I was you. And it only takes one mistake and you're over. Why have that much ego? Why not just be humble and go, I'm great at my product or great at my traffic, or you might be good at both, but I'm not good at the running the business, so I'm going to get involved with somebody that's good at running the business. Be humble enough to know that.
Especially when it is easier than ever to collaborate and to find those other people that you could work with. Okay, I want to know a couple more things and then we are going to wrap it up. I'm really interested to know if you have daily routines or habits that feed into your success, because it's something that I'm so interested in. I have a very strict morning routine that I love, that I just think sets up the day in the perfect way. So I want to know if you have any real habits for success that you'd encourage other people or some of our younger listeners to incorporate into their day.
I think it's really weird because I'm at a different time in my life. You know, I'm 57 now. I'm not a spring chicken. So the habits that I had now compared to the habits I had before are a lot more healthier. Healthy body, healthy mind. I used to keep fit. I mean, it's weird. My habit now is to have a really good work life balance. What is the point of doing well in life if all you're doing is working? So, what I try to do is I don't work Fridays, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I know that's going to quite shock everyone out there, but I don't do that. But what I do is I work hard Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I'm trying to have a good work life balance because I've
Mhm.
done the 5 days a week. Look, I don't want to go back there. So what I've become over time, I used to be a terrible micromanager. I always thought I could do every job better than everyone else. Is I've become a better delegator. So the
Mhm.
less time you work, the better you got to become at delegating. Nowadays, my Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays would be I would wake up, I would try to do a bit of meditation to quiet my mind,
Mhm.
maybe do a little bit of a gentle workout. Then I would usually write a LinkedIn post because I'm very active on LinkedIn. Then I have a smoothie. 12 to 2, I'd start off with my PA at about 12, have lunch about 1, but spend at least an hour, hour and a half on some personal business stuff that I've got to do, answer my emails, X, Y, and Z. And then every day from 2 to 6 o'clock, I would be in Zoom calls or meeting people, and I would stick to that religiously. It would always start with a 12 o'clock. I have a weekly meet with my VC team, with my managing partner, and the rest of the team, and we talk about what we're going to do that week. But it's really mainly about I'm trying to focus on running my business like Warren Buffett did, on using 3 words: yes, no, maybe, forcing people to ask me questions. And then I would go, yeah, I like what you're thinking there. No, I don't like what you're thinking. Or there's some essence I like there, but have you thought about this? Why don't you go away and think about that bit more and then come back? I want to stop being the answer man.
Mm.
So I want to force people to be good around me because
Mhm.
if they're good, I work less, and that's great.
Mhm. So everybody's daily routine or habits might be different, but I think it's finding what works for you and putting that bit of discipline in really does help with focus. Okay, this one is going to be a tricky one. I don't know how you're going to answer it, but if you had to pick your greatest lesson that you've learned across your career to date, what would that be? And then after that, I'm going to ask you if you had to give our young people one big piece of advice, what would that be? And they may overlap, I'm not sure. I just wanted to spell them both out for you. But if you could talk us through your biggest lesson and then your biggest piece of advice for our young people.
It's weird because I was listening to a podcast the other day with Bear Grylls.
Right.
I love his positivity, Bear Grylls. And I think what he said to his children, he said that you might not be the smartest kid in class. You might not be the most talented kid in class. You might not be the best sportsman. But what I want you to be is the kid that never gives up trying. So that was the story for me.
Mm-hmm.
Never stop trying. Every time you get knocked down, brush yourself off and get back up and try again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was just listening a minute ago to the Taylor Swift podcast about her career. She forced her family at the age of 13 to move to Nashville because she thought that's where you had to live when you were in country music. Well, that resilience, I guess, says a lot.
Mm.
Believe in yourself, follow your heart, be brave, and trust your instincts.
Mm-hmm. And actually, something that you talked about earlier was how back to connecting the dots, all of those things that you had tried in your early career, what you'd learned when you were in America and working at the markets and seeing those containers and everything else, it all made sense for that bigger picture further down the line. So even if you try and fail, find the lesson in the failure because it's definitely always there.
Yeah, don't look at adversity in a negative way.
Mm,
I'm actually going to say something else.
yeah,
Please don't fall, kids, for the get rich quick scheme.
yeah,
For every story about somebody that got rich quick, I'll give you 100 stories of people that got poor quick.
yeah,
There's no replacement for hard work. There's no replacement for endeavor. There's no replacement for graft. Put your head down, be humble, learn your lessons, and, who knows?
yeah. I suppose actually another thing that the social media world has created is a tendency or maybe a temptation to want to focus more on how your life looks rather than how it feels and how it is.
Yeah.
So I suppose something that I'd say to our young people as well is like you just said, focus on yourself and what your goals are, what it means for you, what you want to achieve, and absolutely do not worry about what it's looking like, because that's not really what matters at the end of the day, is it? And I guess finally, and we've maybe covered this in that last chat, but if you were to go back to Roger when he was 16, 17, thinking about leaving school and going to that degree that he didn't really want to do, what would you say to him?
I would say to that kid, you know what? Believe in yourself. You are good. It's okay to feel down. It's okay to lose your job. It's okay for things to go wrong.
Mm.
Dust yourself down, get back up.
Yeah, you talked earlier about those few very formative situations in your early life that really you could have dealt with in a completely different way. So from the attack when you were younger to the turning up at the airport with just your bag in your back, all of those different things really could have sent you down a different pathway. So something you've talked quite a lot about is turning that adversity into drive and into resilience. But also on the flip side, knowing that you don't have to achieve success overnight and you don't have to do it all alone. There are plenty of people out there to help you. There's plenty of people who'll give you a chance along the way.
Yeah, totally. I want to actually quote one final stat to everyone, actually. It was something that I wanted to bring up. And it was a study recently done by the Mayor of London, Sadiq, and it really shocked me. 1 in 5 jobs in London are in the creative industries.
Mm.
That's amazing. So, don't think that you can't be successful if you're creative or you're in marketing, because 1 in 5 jobs in London are in the creative industry. And we've got one of the best creative industries
Yeah.
in the world in music, in art, in fashion. And also, we have the best art college system in the world.
Mm.
So please follow your dreams, follow your heart. Don't fall for that, you know, wives' tale that you've got to chase the money, you've got to do something vocational. Yes, of course. But it's okay to follow your heart, because I followed my heart and that's brought me my limited success in life.
It brought you plenty of success, which I'm sure everybody's loved listening to. And I suppose on that, you're sat in the creative industry. Something that we do a lot at the foundation is demythify industries. Actually, there's so many jobs in those industries that our young people might not yet know about, but there will be a job that is perfectly aligned to your skill set and your passions and all of those things. So it's really about continuing to look, continue to try things, and finding mentors, asking for help, and exploring those different opportunities. So thank you for that.
And also a big thank you to EY Foundation. I mean, Ernst and Young do not need to do what they do, but they are genuine about young entrepreneurs and getting young entrepreneurs into the finance sector. And I think that's really admirable, because, you're sort of demystifying what it's like to get into that industry. And I think that's great to see.
Yeah, it's a big priority for us and for EY to make sure that all this fantastic talent that businesses are often missing out on have the opportunity to get in those doors, because they have so much to give, and that's what we see all across our programs. Thank you for that. But Roger, I know I haven't caught up with you once before. I think we could probably talk all day, but we're going to have to wrap this up here. Thank you so much, Roger. I hope you enjoyed it too. And thank you to all of you for listening. And if you liked today's episode, please click to follow us and leave a 5-star review. That would be ideal. In fact, as well, please share the podcast with somebody you know that think would benefit from this conversation, from Roger's advice, because we want to ultimately help as many people as possible. So that is all for today. We'll be back soon with more fantastic guests on the next episode of the series. But in the meantime, keep an eye out for our mini-sode, and thanks again for listening, and we'll see you all soon.